wrong pretty much did go wrong for him in that series. So now he'll be able to reset and hopefully come into his winner's match with a better mindset. But looking at the match to come, it's going to be XHope versus ShtanUdachi. This one's interesting. ShtanUdachi is a player that's known for his deck building, but he bought a pretty standard lineup to this tournament.
And I think that gives you a great scope of what's at risk in this tournament. ShtanUdachi wants to be a champion. He wants to find himself at the World Championships. Known for putting his own twist on things, we're seeing a lot less of that in this event. $250,000 at stake. He's chosen to go with more standard builds. XHope, though, this guy is an absolute monster of a player, considered one of the favorites of the Chinese players that's here. Omega Zero, the other player they look up to, this guy very easily could be one of the ones to take the whole thing. They all look up to him and respect him for how strong his play has been.
Yeah, much more standard deck list for this one. But let's go ahead. It's about time to jump into the match. So let's go ahead and introduce the players. Coming up first, from China, is he the hope of China? It's XHope. And from Russia, his opponent, the master deck builder himself, it's ShtanUdachi.
It's go time! XHope versus ShtanUdachi.
Мой первый оппонент китайский игрок, который мне практически...
It's very hard to prepare against Chinese players because we didn't see the playoffs. So I didn't know anything about him until I saw his decks a couple of days ago. So it is a big challenge because there are a lot of unknowns.
ShtanUdachi is a fairly new player, so I don't have much information about him. I think our decks are quite close, so we're probably 50-50.
Я думаю, что неплохие, как
I think I have a pretty good chance of winning this matchup. I'd estimate 55% to win.
Basically, I don't want to put too much pressure on myself, because that could throw off my whole match. So I think of this as just another match.
XHope versus ShtanUdachi. Ready, set, go!
Hello everyone, we are ready to get into the next series of the day, and it's going to be ShtanUdachi versus XHope. I am Raven, and joining me is a caster you may not actually recognize at the moment. He's new to the 2017 Hearthstone scene. It is Bahamas Sottle. Welcome to the desk.
Yeah, we may have an all-new Sottle here, but unfortunately for you guys, we are stuck with the same old Raven, so move forward.
Very harsh. I know they love me, really. But yeah, this next matchup we've got coming up now is absolutely going to be fantastic. ShtanUdachi versus XHope. What can you tell me about these two players going into this match?
I mean, personally, I am just a huge fan of ShtanUdachi. I think he's a phenomenal player. You know, back when I was playing competitively, the first major that I went to, I brought a deck that was innovated by ShtanUdachi, the original build of Tempo Mage. And that alone is not the only deck he's pioneered. He is a massive, massive deck builder, one of the biggest pioneers of new strategies in the entire Hearthstone scene.
Yeah, we are going to be getting into game one. ShtanUdachi on the Mage and XHope on the Shaman. This is kicking off now, and you can see XHope already chewing on that hat.
Yeah, there is a bit of a story about this hat. We've noticed this and thought it was just like a nervous mannerism, something that he did to keep himself calm. When we spoke to him about it, it's so much more than that. He actually feels like he's communicating with the cards through his hat. There's this whole level of weird mysticism going on, but nonetheless, he is going to need more than his hat's help to get his way through this series against such a phenomenal player as ShtanUdachi.
Yeah, and we'll find out more about that later on, but for now, as you can see, what do you make of these opening hands here? XHope on the Jade Shaman and ShtanUdachi on the Reno Mage. Bit of a slow game it's looking like for Stan here.
Yeah, it's going to be a fairly slow, grindy matchup since the nerfs to Small-Time Buccaneer that we saw a little while ago. Shaman is now exclusively kind of in mid-range form, but still very wide in terms of archetypes within that. This is the very Jade-heavy version from XHope, and that's going to give him the ability to go into the long game against the Reno Mage. ShtanUdachi's Reno Mage, though, is actually a very cycle-heavy, burn-heavy version. So despite perhaps popular wisdom, it might actually be ShtanUdachi that's pushing for the quick finish in this game, trying to get through through his deck quickly and pick up a big burn combination finish.
Yeah, and XHope is playing some of the healing cards as well. So Jinyu, Water Speaker, for example. So Shtan is going to have to really set up his kill turns, because the second he misses that, range of his burst damage, he's just going to, really struggle to finish the game from that point.
It is just the one Jinyu Water Speaker for XHope though, so if that is not in hand when ShtanUdachi does switch to the aggressive line, that could be a problem. The other big deal with XHope's deck list is that he's only running one Maelstrom Portal and one Lightning Storm, which are excellent cards when you're coming up against an aggro deck. Very, very dead cards sometimes against a slow deck like Reno Mage. So his deck being just full of more and more chunky mid-range options should help him out significantly in this matchup.
Yeah, and we see the Doomsayer come down there from Shtan, and XHope probably okay with that at this point. You only really had Bran on curve anyway, and that is a bit vulnerable to some of the removal spells from the Mage, and now he'd be able to just get that hero power down and reduce the thing from below cost in his deck in general, but as we can see in his hand as well, as that was his draw on that turn.
Yeah, ShtanUdachi just using the free tempo of the Doomsayer here to drop the Acolyte. And I want to go back to a point that Admirable made just on the lead-in to this game, where he said, ShtanUdachi actually feels pretty bad about the fact that he's had to bring fairly standard stuff to this tournament. He does feel like kind of a deck innovator, and he wanted to try and find a creative lineup, couldn't do so. The one deck when we spoke to him that he really did put a lot of faith in, though, and that he's really 100% happy with, is apparently this Reno Mage. So no surprise to me just to see him leading out with this, if it was a conscious pick and not just a randomization strategy. So I'm expecting big results from this Reno Mage deck if Shtan has this much faith in it.
Yeah, and speaking of big results, you can see how Shtan got to this point in the tournament, taking down some huge names like Dr. P, Powder, Nyria. A lot of big names there. He got victories over, but XHope is the one that matters right now.
He certainly is, and he's just having a thing right now as to how he wants to deal with this potential secret coming down, and whether he wants to respect the value of the Acolyte. 5 damage from this thing from below is potentially a huge chunk of damage to be sending into the Acolyte of Pain, but the longer he leaves that thing around, the more potential there is for Shtan to just ping it off turn by turn and just cycle through his deck. And as I mentioned, this is the Reno Mage deck that's playing very much akin to the Freeze Mage strategy, with all the extra burn, all the extra cycle, Novice Engineers and Loot Hoarders, etc. Really trying to make a push for a big combo finish.
Yeah, and we see the power of the Jade Shaman in the fact that, the Bran combos are actually very easy to do. Jade Spirit only 4 mana, so a bit later in the game. Very easy to combo together, but then you put Jade Claws into the mix, and that is just 5 mana. You ramp up your Jades by 2. Bran's still on the board and needs to be dealt with. XHope is putting himself in a very, very strong position very early in the game, and it might force some kind of Kazakus potion out early on to try and clear the board if this continues to spiral out of control.
Yeah, ShtanUdachi just coining out the Emperor here, just trying to buy some tempo for the upcoming turns. He's going to take an absolute beating in the meantime, especially leaving this Bran up on board, but he had no answer to it available. And I do love the decision from XHope on the previous turn, as I talked about disrespecting the Acolyte, pushing the damage to face, the size of the board that he built here. He's saying to ShtanUdachi, you don't have time to ping that Acolyte. You have to spend all your mana here to fight for tempo, so I'm just going to push as much aggressive damage as I can.
Yeah, and XHope it seems to be in a really good position here, because he can trade the weapon and the 2 Jades into the Emperor quite easily, and then get more value because this Bran is still alive. Just drop a Jade Spirit. Boom. That's like, 4 Jade ticks in 2 cards. Effectively, well, 2.5 maybe, because you played the Bran as well. But, in effect, ramping up very, very quickly, considering the very early game wasn't really there for XHope.
Yeah, the Emperor discount here for ShtanUdachi, though, does give him a lot of very, very live top decks. If he picks up Flame Strike, for example, or any other high-value removal card, the swing turn with Inkmaster Solia is even more effective, since it would actually allow him to play those cards off curve. That looks like a Flame Strike to me. The Solia here is huge, and that 1 damage from the Acolyte that he disrespected is going to be able to take out that 5/5, but that's the trade that would have happened anyway, the 5/5 into the Acolyte. So he has actually netted a significant amount of free damage by attacking face with that thing from below.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's still only 1 card draw for Shtan. It's kind of the best outcome to a certain extent for XHope. So that was a huge clear there for Shtan. Looking really good to not let the Jades get completely out of control, but XHope still has Jade Lightning, another Claws, another Spirit. This is not going to be one of those Jade Shaman games that you don't really draw any of your Jade cards till very, very late in the game, and then the size of them being starting at 1/1 going to 2/2 isn't impactful enough.
And let's go back a second and talk about the play of ShtanUdachi playing Emperor Thaurissan in that situation as well. He had Kazakus in hand. It would have been a very, very slow play, but he could have gone for that, tried to pick up a potion for the next turn. But this is something that I've heard Admirable talking about more and more recently, is the propensity of good players to play with the cards in their deck as well as the cards in their hand. ShtanUdachi, having drawn this incredibly minion-heavy hand, knew that he had so many efficient removals to be able to pick up off the top of his deck the next turn, took the big risk with the Emperor, and now this huge swing of the 5/5 on the board against nothing is everything for him.
Yeah, and here are two Kazakus potions potentially going to draw first with the Novice Engineer, and because of the brand, that's going to be some huge value there. That is absolutely amazing turn for ShtanUdachi. XHope is a little shake of the head there. He's just like, oh, come on, this is too much value for me to handle at this point.
I do wonder whether we will see Shtan go for a 1-mana potion here, because there is a realistic block pop being face down on the board right now if there's pressure from hand from XHope, but Shtan goes completely the other way, going for high value with the 10 mana instead.
Yeah, bear in mind, there is no Reno available yet. There is an Alex Straza, which can half act as a Reno, going back up to 15 if you've been pushed low enough. But that's generally not too reliable in circumstances like this.
Yeah, I'm just going to trade away the Drake, which makes it significantly more difficult for any block pop situations. I definitely respect the option to go with the 10 mana play, just try and max out on value here. Gets Transform All and deal 8, and deal 8 is a very strong pickup for this deck because of, as I said, it's very often trying to set up those Freeze Mage style 2-turn lethals while protecting an ice block.
Yeah, it's going to be a big deal if Shtan can pull this off, and XHope's kind of in a backward spot now. As the Jade deck, you normally want to just overrun the board, but the Flame Strike now combined with, you know, the reasonable minion build-up that Shtan has, nothing too crazy on the board, but you know, enough to cause some issues here, and not that many Jades. The Chieftain is available to create a 5/5 and a 6/6 taunt, but that's not going to do much against a board this big already, so it is going to opt for the Maelstrom Portal and start to trade away some of these minions. The Bran, as always, a very high priority target on the board. Yeah,
I remember the tech decisions I talked about at the very start of this matchup, where XHope has gone down to 1 Lightning Storm and 1 Maelstrom Portal in his Shaman deck. Very, very light on AoE factors, which, you know, in theory should be good in this matchup, but when you do run into a board state like that, just annoying 3 and 4 health minions, Lightning Storm is just a card you'd love to have in your hand. And Jade Chieftain, arguably, one of the cards that's not an auto include that he's brought in place of those extra AoEs. So it's very reasonable to say that that Jade Chieftain in his hand, in a lot of people's builds of this deck, would in fact be that second Lightning Storm.
Yeah, you just you give a much stronger and consistent late game instead of being able to, you know, clear a board and try and snap a bad board back into your favor. Right. So we'll see how it turns out for him, as ShtanUdachi actually just has a lot of options, and I feel like this is where he excels and why he likes decks like this. There's just so many options, so many opportunities to make some big plays here, and it's going to be Polymorph, Summon 2 for 5 mana, and as you can hear, that is in fact a Doomsayer. We've all been on the receiving end of that one.
Yeah, he's going to follow it up with the Ice Lance as well, trying to protect his block as best he can, force all of this damage to go into the Doomsayer and find extra turns for himself this way. But you mentioned Shtan excelling in situations where he has a lot of options, and that is pure weight of numbers from him. We've spoken to him, and he said he's probably fairly confident that he has more games of Hearthstone, more Hearthstone wins than any other player here. He's been in every scenario you can imagine, time and time again, and just through weight of experience can navigate his way through these tricky situations.
I think he has more arena wins than most people just have wins.
That's
actually
probably true. Yeah.
I think over 11,000 arena wins, which is oh, there we go, perfect. You know, over 11,000 arena wins. A lot of good players are only around that number in Constructed, which is kind of nuts in itself. Really shows the experience and the time he has committed to this game. XHope continuing to build the board, as Jade decks normally do. He's going to have to deal with this Doomsayer, though, as if not, all will be for nothing.
Yeah, comfortable way to do it, though. And it looks like he's actually going to disrespect the Kazakus here. Had the opportunity to trade that out using the weapon as well, potentially. Volcanic Potion, the first significant AoE that we've seen since the Flame Strike, but it's come out in the wrong order. The Volcanic Potion would have been reasonable against the early Jades, Flame Strike more effective against the later ones, but he did end up having to play that kind of panic Flame Strike just to resolve that horrible early board state. Now Volcanic Potion is in a position where it's just not too effective against these 6/6s and 7/7s. 7/7s that are coming out.
Yeah, it's one of the big differences between Reno Mage and Reno Lock in the Jade matchups. You know, Reno Lock tends to have a Twisted Nether and the ability to generate a big Shadow Flame to deal with a board like this. But Reno Mage doesn't really have that option outside of a Frost Nova Doomsayer, and cross your fingers that, you know, that it goes off. So once the board gets in this kind of state, it's very difficult, or it will be very difficult for Shtan to really deal with this consistently.
Yeah, Shtan recognizing that he really does need to play the Frost Nova this turn. Whenever you draw that Nova and you have Antonidas in hand, an alarm goes off in your head of wanting to pair those two cards together because that combination is so effective, but with no other way to even realistically prevent the block being popped this turn, it had to be a Frost Nova turn from ShtanUdachi, and that Archmage Antonidas is getting just slowly stranded in his hand. And this is the goal of any deck against a Freeze Mage-like strategy, is just to keep up as much pressure as you can. Make sure your opponent has to do something awkward every single turn. Don't give them free turns to be able to just freely draw cards, freely set up a combo turn to give themselves a 2 or 3 turn lethal situation. And XHope so far has navigated that perfectly, making sure he has enough board pressure on the board and enough resources in hand to be able to refill through any likely board clears from his opponent.
Yeah, and he still has plenty available in hand, as you said, and still plenty more impactful cards in the deck to continue this onslaught. Just got to trade into the Thanos there, just give Shtan the card draw, he was going to get it anyway, and maybe, you know, playing around some more AoEs like the Warlock potion, for example. The extra +1 is actually going to help out quite a lot, because as we can see, at least the Trog, 1 Jade, and the Jade Spirit are on 3 health, so that extra damage would really help out.
Don't think Shtan will be thinking too long about this turn. That 10 mana potion, if we caught it correctly early on, is polymorph all and deal 8. So the 8 is going straight to the dome. And these this collection of enormous, intimidating Jade Golems is turned into adorable sheep in trousers. And ShtanUdachi is suddenly looking in a very, very reasonable position in this matchup.
I mean, to some people, this board could look just as intimidating. Maybe people are scared of sheep wearing trousers.
I have a question, though. I wonder if there was any merit in him trading his Kazakus off into the Taunted Jade Golem that was on the board, therefore not creating any minion in play for XHope to be able to trade off to this turn, and then stopping him from being able to develop board of his own. Because right now, he can trade off a 1/1, leave space from the board, and develop a more powerful threat. Whereas if that 1 sheep from Shtan was not there, if he killed his Kazakus preemptively, then XHope would really have no option in terms of board development this turn. That could potentially mean an additional turn for Shtan in the future.
Yeah, that sort of is a good point.
Thanks,
I'll give
buddy.
you that one. I'll give you that one, friend. The only downside, or the opposite side of that, is the extra damage can potentially help Shtan just end the game.
Right.
You know, like 3 damage to 0 damage doesn't sound like a lot, but XHope is just sitting on 13 health, and there is a Forgotten Torch in hand for Shtan. And now there's a Frostbolt, so he's maybe starting to piece together this damage. He could even just Antonidas Torch this turn and just say, well, okay, you know, we're going to get closer and try and rely on what he's going to draw next turn as well. So it's going to be pretty huge.
But let's take a quick look at the turn if this guy was not in play, right? If there was no room for this guy to be summoned, then your turn this turn would simply be Volcanic Potion Reno, and you would have a 4/6 on the board against nothing and 30 health with Ice Block still up.
Wouldn't be a bad outcome.
It would be solid, let's put it that way.
It would be reasonable.
Yeah.
I would be okay with that outcome if I was Shtan in this situation. Now this is going to change away from a potential burn plan to just, I will stop your 8/8 hitting me in the face and clear off these little sheep. I do love the getting the Burglary Bully down as opposed to just torching off. The minion is frozen, it cannot attack. Well, it's not frozen, we saw him play before. But the minion is... Woo! That one's a freebie. Yeah, so he can't attack. There's no reason to play the burn card to kill off the minion this turn. Much, much better getting the Burglary Bully down, combined with the fact that you have Mr. Antonidas in hand.
Mr. Antonidas, wow. Such respect given to the man I just like to call Tony.
Well, we can't all be friends with him, you know. Maybe one day I can call him Tony.
So the threats are going to keep coming now from XHope, but he does have to now beat this Reno in hand. The Jades are getting huge, so almost any board XHope generates now threatens almost an automatic 1 or 2 turn lethal, even when a Reno does come down, or at least to pop the ice block. So he has done very, very well in terms of ramping up his Jade Golems, and that was in no small part due to that massive brand value that he got early on that you spoke about.
Yeah, and now we're going to see, I'm imagining, an attempt at the Freeze Mage checkmate. style move, which will be Antonidas with the torch to face. You generate an additional fireball. Your opponent's on less than 12 health. Normally 2 fireballs does the trick.
Yes, indeed. And remember, Jinyu Water Speaker is in this deck from XHope, but only as a single copy. And Shtan is assessing his odds right now, imagining whether he can beat that card if it's in the hand, and with not being picked up now, that double fireball in hand plus the ping the next turn from Shtan is just going to be checkmate. Ice Block still protecting him. The perfectly executed Reno Mage game plan from ShtanUdachi, thanks in no small part to that big Emperor play early on.
Yep.
Yes, he got lucky with the Flame Strike draw, no doubt about it, but he put himself in the spot to be able to get lucky. Sometimes those are the lines that you have to see as a top-level player.
Yeah, XHope clutching the hat there, but that draw from the Azure Drake is not what he's after. And he knows there's at least one fireball in the hand, so he's probably just hoping against hope that there isn't another one. He can proc the block and kill the Antonidas.
Yep, smart. Always looking for the silver lining, Raven.
Look, one of us has to be positive, so
this is why you're the eternal optimist, but I think XHope knows. You can see the nervous chewing of the hat has come out again. He was speaking to his deck right there, trying to summon that Jinyu out from the depths of his remaining library. It did not happen. The Roaring Torch comes out just for a bonus from Shtan.
What more do you want?
But he is there. 13 damage, double fireball ping. ShtanUdachi going to a 1-0 lead.
Yeah, extremely well executed game overall. XHope just couldn't quite get going fast enough, and then combined with the polymorph all potion, the freeze effect, just wasn't enough. And ShtanUdachi takes game 1 in this series versus XHope.
Yeah. XHope there on camera, looking fairly nonchalant. He knows there's a long series to go, but we've talked fairly extensively about ShtanUdachi. What do we know about XHope as a player?
Yeah, I mean, so XHope is obviously, hailing from China. He's one of the best players and has extremely large amount of success in the Gold Series, which, if you do not know, is the biggest deal ever in China. It is the huge Hearthstone tournament as well, so we can actually find out more about XHope here.
I do 2 things to get prepared for a big tournament. The first one is to prepare for my opponent's deck and playstyle. The second thing is to always make good friends with my hat.
XHope!
I will communicate with my hat so that we stay good friends. The story of my hat is coming from the first card game at our age that we had experience with. There was a cartoon based on the card game where a character communicated with his cards. So with Hearthstone as a card game, when I'm looking for some card, my hat will help bring good cards to me. I talk with my hat, but sometimes he doesn't get my point and brings some not so good cards. So I just slightly chew it and tell him, yeah, help bring some good cards to me. Personally, I'm not a good English speaker, so I think my hat can also help to translate my wish to the cards themselves. My hat is very important to me, so I'll do my best to protect it. So just like my passport, I'll never lose it.
I bet you didn't expect that. One of the first instances, at least I'm aware of sort of superstitious sort of styles in a Hearthstone player. It's kind of cool, kind of interesting.
Yeah, just in case anyone thought I was talking complete nonsense at the end of that last game where I said he was trying to summon a Jinyu Water Speaker from his deck through the medium of his hat. No, that is literally what he tries to do when playing Hearthstone.
We do joke around a lot.
Yeah.
But not when we're talking about XHope's hat. We are going to get into game 2 now. ShtanUdachi is 1-0 up on XHope. This is a best-of-7 series. It's going to be XHope on his Mage and ShtanUdachi on his Shaman. So the classes are now flipped.
They are. The classes are flipped, but the archetypes are different. XHope is playing Freeze Mage, not the Reno Mage that ShtanUdachi was playing. Yes, his Reno Mage was very Freeze Mage-like, but this is the real deal. This is not Diet Freeze Mage. This is full-fat, original Freeze Mage.
The best kind.
There you go. In terms of tech choices, the Evolved Kobold list is pretty much 100% standard these days. The one real floating tech card in Freeze Mage is second Ice Barrier versus Flame Strike, and XHope has gone for Flame Strike on that equation. So he does have a little bit more board clearing potential, which will help out against ShtanUdachi's Shaman deck, which again is not the mid-range Jade Shaman we saw before. It is good old-fashioned aggro Shaman. Let's just count to 30, Raven.
Yeah, we can do it together, I think,
right,
Sol.
okay.
But, you know, you say good old-fashioned, but we can see already ShtanUdachi's opening hand.
Yeah.
Hammer of Twilight. This is not a new card to the game, but a new card to the deck. And how does this card, you know, why is this even chosen in this deck anymore?
So Hammer of Twilight has actually always just kind of objectively been a strong card. If you evaluate it purely on the power curve of a Hearthstone card, it's a very, very effective weapon. The problem was when Spirit Claws was in the deck, which was an insane card, so obviously goes in place of Hammer of Twilight, the weapons just kind of cannibalize each other, and you have too many total turns of weapons to include Hammer of Twilight or Doomhammer in your deck, for example. Now that the Spirit Claws have gone, there's room for another weapon, and the big reason why we see people going for Hammer of Twilight over Doomhammer is that it's not as easily countered by Acidic Swampoos or Harrison Jones, the common tech cards that you always see in tournaments when players are trying to counter this kind of deck.
Yeah, and we did see from XHope the opening there, the fantastic response to a Totem Golem with a Doomsayer. Yeah. He's just like, yeah, try and kill it if you can. But ShtanUdachi did have a half response to a certain extent with the Jade Claws. You still generate and start to get those Jades rolling, and I can only wonder what XHope is saying to his hat right now.
He's even covering so the rest of the room can't hear
we
what
can only
he's saying.
imagine.
It's a private conversation between him and the hat. He will just be wishing for cycle, for board clear effects, and a nice timely burn combo to be able to finish the job. So hopefully this time the hat gets the message and delivers the cards that he needs.
What if he's not even talking about the game? He's just like, hey, been enjoying the Bahamas? How's it going?
See, I get the impression that the hat isn't truly sentient. It doesn't actually have hopes and dreams and aspirations.
Just because you don't, Sol, doesn't mean the hat doesn't, okay?
It can only connect with Hearthstone cards. That is my understanding
okay.
of XHope's invented lore of the hat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Patches in hand. Not really what Shtan is going to want here. Still, it's going to be okay for some extra on-demand damage, but definitely not as good in the Shaman as some other classes, although Flame Tongue can help out with that sometimes for just a little bit extra burst damage. But now, Finley, what are you looking at here for the choices? Goes for the armor.
Yeah.
Life tap is not what you normally want to do against a burst combo deck.
Right. I mean, that was the huge breaking point of this matchup, really. That was the turn where ShtanUdachi had to pick a line and commit to it. He could have taken life tap, tried to be as aggressive as possible, pick up as much damage as he could, and just purely race for damage, essentially. Instead, he's gone for armor up here, which of course is one of the big reasons why Freeze Mage historically struggles with the warrior class, and he's going to try and use this to just draw the game out an extra 1 or 2 turns, and that way just naturally see 1 or 2 extra cards from his deck anyway. And with the Drake in hand already for that little bit of extra card draw, I think I'm kind of down with this decision. It's probably the safest line, the most consistent line overall.
Yeah. Here comes the coin into the Blizzard from XHope, so, you know, you really do against a deck like this have to only use your stalls or your AoE damage at the, you know, really when you have to. You need the most value out of these cards to be able to go into the long game, which, as you just mentioned, Shtan is kind of signals that he wants the ability to continue the game out. It's not going to be, I've run out of cards, I guess I lose.
Shtan had a non-ridiculous option to just dome XHope with the lightning bolt there. It was dealing 4 damage, which is probably the most it will do all game. It's also kind of unlikely to get back to that point now that the chance to roll spell damage totem has gone. So he had 1 mana available, and casting the bolt didn't really interrupt anything he would want to do on the following turn.
Could Hammer of Twilight hero power? If he wants
true.
to whip in
Yeah,
hero
that's true.
powers.
Yeah.
Because going forward, he can just cast the lightning bolts whenever, right? They're just
Right.
1 mana. I'll just, you know, maybe even burst them down if XHope has any, you know, thoughts that he might be safe and not skip an ice block turn, for example, to get more value out. I don't mind it, but he definitely
I don't
could
mind it
have
either.
done it
It's just, you know, illuminating a decision that may, you know, not seem obvious to a lot of onlookers. That's definitely a viable thing there, just to get the maximum 4 damage value out of that lightning bolt.
Or just plan for the Maelstrom.
Yeah, he just knew. He's got a talking hat of his own that whispered in his ear that his next card was Maelstrom Portal, and he held back.
Okay, so XHope's got a hell of a lot of damage in hand.
He does.
A lot of damage, actually.
Without the Emperor discount and the fact that the game is only on 7 mana right now, though, it's hard for him to really pair anything significant with the Evolved Kobold, but he might just be able to set up just a straight burn the face plan over the next 2 or 3 turns. The problem is there's only one ice block protecting his face right now, so he doesn't know whether that one block will buy him the probably 3 turns at least that he needs from this position, but he doesn't have really significant card draw or any card draw in his hand to be able to dig through for better options. So when you see this kind of hand with Freeze Mage, this is something that really separates the men from the boys in terms of being able to play this deck effectively into a maximized win rate. It's when you see a hand like this, you have to recognize that it's time to commit to something. You have to pick a line, find a win condition, and just commit to it the best you can.
Yeah, one of the benefits, at least that XHope has at the moment, is as you can see now, the board is not threatening to him. He's just pinged off the highest damage minion on the board. There is now just a 1/1 Finley. The Frostbolt to the face as well means that he's not going to be able to get an attack in with that Hammer of Twilight this turn, and already having the other Frostbolt with the Ice Lances in hand means that you kind of can use that Frostbolt this turn to be a little bit more safe.
Yeah, threatening as hard as he can here, and XHope is going to have to find his way through this expertly if he's going to find the necessary amount of turns that he needs. So this turn, unless he wants to try and desperately prevent this block, he does have a second Frostbolt and both Ice Lances in hand, which can be paired with Evolved Kobold at any time in the near future. So if you were to Fireball ping this turn, then that would be 21 health for ShtanUdachi. Shtan armors back up to 23. And then Frostbolt Ice Lance is 11 damage, plus the 6 from the Kobold is 17. So he's actually just not there in terms of damage just yet.
Yeah, it's really tough, isn't it? It's gonna be really difficult because he knows Shtan has been holding one of those cards in hand for what, 3 turns now?
Yep.
So it's probably burn. If it was a minion, it would have hit the board. So and then you've got to think what kind of burn that is and how to manage this. And as you mentioned earlier, no second ice block is available. Alex Strauss is not even there for next turn because that could be a huge way to win as well. If Shtan just expends his resources and then you Alex yourself and you're like, well, okay, try and kill me now. But this is going to be very tough. XO, a bit of a shake of the head. Letting the rope burn to a little bit close.
Yeah, I think...
close. Okay, Blizzard.
I think that shake of the head just betrays exactly what I was talking about. Obviously, he took the full length of his turn to really consider all the options there, but he came to the same conclusion that I came to, which is the setup for a quick win condition just is not there, so he has to continue to stall. The Jade Lightning being picked up here gives him a much more effective way to pop the block now, gets to retain burst damage in hand and generate a 3/3 on the board. This is looking fantastic for ShtanUdachi.
Yeah, he has the Lightning Bolt. If he had to use both, you would say that, well, Shtan has actually drawn a lot of burn. The odds of him just drawing a minion next turn is actually quite high at this point. But he's got the Lightning Bolt. Blood Mage Thanos is not what he needs, but he can use it to cycle. He can play the Blood Mage and ping it off to try and draw another card because he pretty much has to at this point. I don't think you can rely on Frost Nova keeping you alive on 1 health next turn.
Moderately important point here. Did you notice which Lightning Bolt Shtan used? Did he use the one on the far left of his hand from our perspective?
I think he might have,
because
actually.
That would be the card that XHope has a read on, right? That's the card that you said has been there for 2 or 3 turns. So it's actually important to use that card in this situation because it might lull your opponent into a situation of being able to say, okay, I knew that card on the far left was burn. Now that's gone. He may not have burn in hand anymore. But again, counter-argument to that, mana was floated this turn again, and there is a card being held back in the hand. So can XHope identify again that that is a burn card in hand?
Especially as well because there was the hero power used, and it's not like Shtan is afraid of dying because there's been no Emperor, for example, this turn. So it's going to be the Frost Nova. It's going to be the Ice Lance as well. But oh, okay. I thought he aimed the ping at the Blood Mage. I was like, no, that should be first. So that is going to be the game, though. Shtan did have the Lightning Bolt, and if he didn't have it, that was only a Flame Tongue on the draw. So he's going to go up 2-0 against XHope here.
Yeah, incredibly comfortable position now from ShtanUdachi, but it's by no means over. We saw B787 in a similarly commanding position in the previous series. Frozen was able to come all the way back, but the potential difference here is that ShtanUdachi threw his loyalties out of the window. There was, he loves playing creative decks. He loves playing decks that are just a little bit out of the ordinary and off meta. But for the sake of the tournament win, the prestige that comes with it, he chose to play the solid stuff. B7 chose to bring that crazy Reno Priest list, Reno Control Priest, not even Reno Dragon, perhaps paid the price for it. Shtan is valuing his chances in the tournament a little bit more above his personal pride and his personal loyalties. So he probably has a more solid lineup to be able to see this series out from a commanding position.
Yeah, it was such a huge surprise. I mean, we discussed it earlier on. It just shocked me that he did that. But as you can check out here, we can have a look at some of the deck breakdown information where no two players brought the same 5 deck archetypes to tournaments, which is kind of nuts. Everyone thinks, oh, there's just a set best, the best set of decks to bring, and that just hasn't been the case for here. And only 6 out of 16 brought Druid decks, which was another surprise due to how many people have been having huge success with Jade Druid recently.
Yeah, I think in the past as well, we've seen people bringing Druid as a hard target to Reno Mage, not so in this. And the other big takeaway from that for me is Shaman only in 11 of 16 of the lineups. I think it's the 5th most popular class overall off the top of my head. So after so long of Shaman dominance in the game of Hearthstone, have we finally turned the corner, at least in the competitive scene?
Until the elementals arrive in the expansion, and
that
it's like, hey,
scary, dude. I'm not gonna lie.
Legendary is insane, but this match is also legendary as we're going to be getting into it very, very soon. ShtanUdachi versus XHope. ShtanUdachi is 2-0 up. He's going to be on the Warlock, and XHope on the Mage again. And again, this is just another, we said Shtan hasn't brought anything too crazy, but these types of decks are the ones he excels at the most. We saw it in the Mage especially. He just knows what to do in almost any given situation.
And honestly, you say these types of decks, but I think this is true for ShtanUdachi in terms of any deck. When we got to sit down with him, he said the words, I don't have a favorite deck. I don't have any loyalties to any particular decks. I don't even really have historically a favorite card. I just like playing something new as often as I can, and I like playing the best decks. Quite often, I think I'm capable of building something outside of the meta, which has a higher win rate than anything anyone else can do. Today, this week, for this tournament, this enormous high-stakes tournament, he couldn't come up with a strategy along those lines. So we're seeing him play more standard stuff, but he is still more than well-versed in piloting the meta decks.
Yeah, 100%. I see a fairly slow opening here, not too much of a surprise. Both these decks aren't exactly rush out of the gate, although Shtan's opening hand is more akin to a zoo opening that quite often Reno Lock just can do. If they just curve out minions, it's kind of a threat in itself without worrying about the huge late game potential that Reno Lock has available to them.
This hand from ShtanUdachi is looking fantastic. On paper, this is a very winnable matchup for the Freeze Mage. Essentially, Reno Warlock pressures itself to an extent due to having to life tap in the early turns, lowers its health just that little bit. Then eventually, at some point in the game, the Freeze Mage can kind of just trade Fireball for Reno Jackson. You Fireball them in the face.
Then they have to,
That
right?
puts them in range of a theoretical burst combo, which you don't even have to have in hand. You just threaten having it. Your opponent then has to Reno, and then you proceed down the standard Alexstrasza them and burst them out line. The problem with that now is that Shtan has so much pressure to load up here. An 8-8 on turn 4 and Ragnaros in hand with the coin as well.
Yeah, because the main problem is Shtan has an 8-8 on the board, and that's normally an issue.
The problem is your opponent also gets to play cards.
Yeah, they can respond sometimes as well, so that's pretty good. XHope does have lots of cycle, even just available on the board. The Acolyte of Pain still as a 1-2, and the Thalnos, of course, going to trade into the Mountain Giant now for an additional one. There's the Evolved Kobold. Maybe a little bit too early for XHope's liking, but he knows he does have it available because, you went through the scenario of forcing the Reno. A lot of the time, your opponent's on 26, they're not going to Reno, and you kill them. And that's just the way it can happen, unless they really got a great read that you have that damage.
Yeah, and as you saw there, ShtanUdachi, one of the top 8 point earners in the entire Europe region for the 2016 season. And he said himself, if you go back two years or so, he feels like he probably has more top 100 finishes than anyone else in the entire game. So one of the most accomplished ladder players, as well as open and tournament grinders that we have in the entire scene.
Yeah, but this could be his opportunity to really break out worldwide.
Absolutely.
He's someone who is extremely well known to, pro level. Yeah, especially you. You're like full fanboy over here. But yeah, extremely well known, but not as much to the scene in general. XHope's going down with the Doomsayer now. Comes the old dirty rat response. Evolved Kobold, that's massive.
Huge. 66% chance of a massive outcome there. Alexstrasza or the Evolved Kobold being pulled out there. XHope had that Novice in his hand to potentially play around that opportunity, but Shtan just nails the Evolved Kobold, and now XHope's burst opportunities are so severely limited.
Yeah, and Shtan now going for the Kazakas as well, so doesn't really care for the 3-3, he just wants that potion now and taking the opportunity to do so. The 3-3 won't really matter in this game, but the potion might make a huge impact here.
Yeah, his board is not a massive deal to him right now because he's staring at his turn 7 next turn and Coin Ragnaros available to him. And if you have never played against Rag as a Freeze Mage, which is an absolute nightmare to deal with, particularly after Blood Mage Fireball has already been used to take care of the Mountain Giant, which is one of the only semi-efficient answers that you can have to Ragnaros.
Yeah, and the funny thing as well is you know, if Ragnaros gets played, we can see XHope has Frostbolt, Ice Lance, you know, has these kind of tools to actually deal with it. But then if your opponent uses all that burn on Rag, you're like, well, are you ever going to kill me with Evolved Kobold gone as well? Right.
Doomsayer coming down. This could be recognition from XHope. It could just be him now trying to buy this free turn from the Emperor. He did have the Novice Engineer in play already, which plays around Ragnaros to an extent in the first place. So I think this Doomsayer is less about, you know, the God read on the Coin Rag coming out and just more him trying to set up his clean Emperor for the next turn.
I want a free turn, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Freeze Mage 101. Take a free turn when you can get it.
Okay.
Jam the damage
You know what's really funny? No one will believe me, but I was genuinely like, do you just Leroy? Because you don't have to worry about the 2 Dragonlings that come out, right? You know, the Doomsayer clears those up. And Shtan just actually did, which means I must be okay at Hearthstone. If I saw that play, look, if Shtan made it, it must be good. So, yeah, just getting in that extra damage, as you said, opens up a potential Rag turn. But now summon 2 friendly minions, deal 5 is a very clean way to deal with this Emperor.
And I'm reticent to go too far down the rabbit hole here, but also his potion was deal 5, revive 2. And he saw his opponent set up a Tempo Doomsayer, essentially, which usually signals they want to make one of their big turns on the follow-up. So the only big turn that was available to him on 8 mana there was the Emperor Thaurissan. So by playing the Leroy there, not only did he get the 6 damage, he also put another big minion into his revive pool for when he potentially played the potion the next turn to deal with the Emperor. I don't know if that was Shtan's thinking, but it's a possible next level line that he could have seen.
If you can play more than one Leroy in a deck, you probably try to.
Yep.
Seems pretty good to me. It's all on XHope now to try and defend against this. We obviously have the Ultimate Vision where we can see the Ragnaros is going to be a kind of a nightmare. But as we said in the previous game, XHope's hitting the point where, how do I win this game? I have to decide probably now and then go for it.
Yeah, it looks like he is kind of committing to the long-term plan here. He could have just gone for the Alexstrasza. Basically, Alexstrasza-ing ShtanUdachi in the face that turn would have been a signal of him saying, okay, my best chance is that Reno is in your bottom 16 cards, which, by the way, if you haven't noticed, our wonderful new technology, our card counters, they are there on the right-hand side of your screen, keeping track of the amount of cards left in deck. So if he was to say, you know, you're halfway through your deck, you have about a 50-50 chance, you know, mulligans allowing for you to have Reno in your hand. So I can just Alexstrasza you right now and hope that you don't have that 50-50 shot in your hand. But XHope considers he still has a decent chance being able to push the long game, going for the long-term strategy that I described at the start of the game.
Yeah, and speaking of 50-50s, the Ragnaros took the good side of that one and just punched XHope in the face for 8. Really piling on the pressure now. Very similar situation to what we saw in the last game, where XHope was pressured to a large extent and then just can't quite push enough damage or enough threats himself. This Loot Hoarder not really going to do too much at this point.
Yeah, no Reno available, and now XHope looks like he is going to pull the trigger here. There is the Mistress on board that could potentially pick up extra value, so he's going to go and pair it with the Frost Nova to try and minimize the potential of that happening. But ShtanUdachi does have ways to make this happen here. Shadow Bolting his own Mistress, Siphon Souling the Alexstrasza. All of these are ways to just pick up small incremental heals. He has Farseer to back that up as well, but that big kill switch of the Reno Jackson is not there as of yet. I see the unmistakable sign of a caster trying to count freeze mage damage, Raven.
Have you counted yet?
I haven't, no.
Is it lethal?
3, 6, 9, 13, 17 damage from hand.
Is that including ping?
18 including ping.
Yeah. So he's gonna. Well, he potentially had lethal without the heal, of course. And also we saw the loot hoarder not trade in to get the initial card draw to try and help with Rag. And this Rag may as well have a sniper rifle at this point. He doesn't care for this loot hoarder at all. He knows there's a taunt minion on the board that's going to soak it up. He's just going to hit face every single time. And XHope under more and more pressure. And he just needs to play those torches and hopes he draws the roaring torches the turn after, I think, to try and end this game.
Yeah, the torches have to be played for sure here. I think XHope is definitely too far down the rabbit hole to be able to be considering Reno Jackson at all. He just needs to be jamming that damage to face. Leading with the torches is the most efficient way to do it because it front loads the remainder of your deck with damage. And as you see those torches going in, 5 cards in the deck right now, 6 now that second torch has gone in additionally. So there is huge amounts of damage. The Fireball, Frostbolt, and the double Ice Lance now gives him immediate lethal. So that was a fantastic sequence from XHope, front-loading the additional torches before drawing with the Loot Hoarder, which gave him the clean, lethal setup. The Reno 50-50 was on his side, and the Freeze Mage gets a win on the board.
That is how it's done, and got to be great for XHope. He was under a lot of pressure. We saw the amount of damage that Ragnaros did throughout the game. It was absolutely insane. But correct sequencing really, it didn't matter too much because the Fireball was natural anyway. But it could have really helped him out. If any of those were the multiple draws for the torches, that was huge.
Yeah, so he started that turn with, well, after he drew his card, he had 4 cards remaining. One of those was a natural Fireball, and then he put 2 more Roaring Torches for 6 damage in his deck as well. So that would 3 out of his remaining 6 cards would have been lethal after he attacked with the Loot Hoarder because of the way he sequenced his plays. So that was expertly done from XHope there to pick up that win with the Freeze Mage.
Yeah, XHope must be feeling great to get that win on the board. And Shtan, stuttering a little bit. He's looking good so far, but can check out a little bit more about Stan with a well met.
Well met.
My name is ShtanUdachi. I'm from Russia, Yekaterinburg, 23 years old. I play in Hearthstone like 6-8 hours a day. When I don't play in Hearthstone, I sleep. Best things on the HTC is you can see these beautiful places. It's my first time when I went to tropical Bahamas, so first time I see islands. It's looking really awesome and blue.
Shtan plays the game a lot, and when he doesn't play, he rests so he can play again the next day.
Yeah, you don't get to throw out claims like I have the most top 100 finishes out of anyone. I have more ranked wins than anyone here, unless you're playing a significant amount of Hearthstone. And on top of all those constructed achievements we saw earlier, he's had time to somehow fit in 11,000 arena wins as well. This man is just a Hearthstone machine.
And got a mean frisbee throw by the looks of things there on the beach. So, this guy has many, many talents as we move on to Game 4 in this series. ShtanUdachi on the Warlock and XHope on the Shaman again.
Yeah, it was just a shame about the NA catch on the other end.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll see that again later.
So Reno Lock up against the mid-range Jade Shaman from XHope. So this is not the aggro Shaman that we've seen from ShtanUdachi. It's a more consistent mid-rangey build, and that gives him a little bit of an extra shot against the Reno Lock. Generally, Reno Lock considered favored against the aggressive Shaman builds. The Jade package, though, in Shaman, something like 55% favored against Reno Lock, according to the most recent Vicious Syndicate data.
Yeah, in addition to Bloodlust just being pretty huge.
Yeah,
here.
Exactly.
Reno Lock has some of the best board sweeps in the game, and the most as well. But that doesn't matter if you just blink for 1 second, there's a board full of even totems, and then you die because of Bloodlust. Definitely a very, very real threat. Shtan, though, getting the Doomsday down to answer the Totem Golem this time. So he's got to be feeling pretty good about that opening as well.
Yeah, for sure. And again, you do have to temper that data that is so readily available from Vicious Syndicate and other outlets by weighting it with the specific tech choices that a player has brought to the tournament themselves. So again, we've talked about it. XHope's deck, very light on AoE options. Just the 1 Portal, the 1 Lightning Storm. And those extra mid and late game options in the form of Jade Chieftains, etc. definitely much more effective in this matchup on average than a Lightning Storm or Maelstrom Portal would be, therefore giving him an extra percentage point or 2 in this matchup.
Yeah. And Shtan now getting a couple of minions down, Gang Boss and the Mistress. Nothing too crazy, but going to help clear up those totems, clear up those small Jades as they're generated as well. So just a good set of tools there to just chip away at the tokens.
Yeah, and a lot of the players that we've been talking to this week have mentioned this style of Reno lock that's been slowly evolving, where people are playing for tempo a lot more often. They're emulating the zoo experience a lot more often and just playing minions out on board if they can hit that curve early. So Shtan there with the Doomsayer and then following up with tempo. The idea here is to grip the board, which if he can do so, remember he expects to keep the board because the AoE options are so light from his opponent. Then once he has a board in play, then he can start to tap and refill his hand on options. Very, very similar to what a zoo deck tries to do.
Yeah, because the counter play has had to evolve as well, because you're not used to the Reno deck.
Correct,
You know, building a board before you, that's like, no, that's not how this matchup should go.
Right.
You should just tap till turn 4 or 5 and I get to play stuff. So it requires some very awkward answers here, and XHope going for another 4-mana thing from below, the second of this series, I believe, on curve. But that's not really what you want from the things. You want the 0-mana ones to drop down on a huge value turn.
Yeah, I think it was the only real strong play available for XHope this turn that didn't overload him, which I think he wants to just go ahead and coin Aya on the following turn. Aya would contest this Gang Boss quite nicely, although the token Jade it summons would get farmed by the Gang Boss in the process. But yeah, Aya just such a powerful card whenever you can play it. If it's the first Jade that you play, it just ramps up the clock so quickly. If it's a late game Jade that you play, it's just a huge pile of stats in total. So rushing this card out as quickly as you can is always a pretty solid plan.
Yeah, and looking towards the long game now for Shtan. Does have Bran available along with that Kazakus as well. Emperor, just slamming Emperor on 6. You can trade the Aya into it, I don't care. I want this tick, which is going to hit cards like Kazakus, like Bran, like Siphon Soul as well, making it that bit cheaper and easier to pull off later on.
The Hex pickup gives XHope a much cleaner clear on this Emperor than he would have had otherwise, but I do also wonder from Shtan's side whether we will see Bran Kazakus getting played, or whether he'll potentially save it for Bran Abyssal Enforcer, because in this matchup, when you play Kazakus, you're primarily looking for AoE options, right? So you pair your Bran with a Kazakus to get a second shot at a big AoE effect. Well, Bran Abyssal is already a big AoE effect that's guaranteed, and it's a huge swing that puts a 6/6 into play as well. So that's definitely something that Shtan has to decide here, how he wants to ration out that Bran when he has multiple strong effects to use with it in his hand.
Yeah, especially because something I like to do in this matchup is if you can Bran out the potions, you try and go for a 5-mana AoE into a 10-mana AoE while summoning minions.
Yep.
That's like a great scenario, but we're actually quite a long way away from 10 mana for Shtan here, so he won't be able to just chain into them like that, so it could lead that potential outcome, depending on what the board looks like on XHope's side. And yet again, we see the Bran Jade Claws
so
combo.
strong.
It is insane. 3/3/4/4. 2-attack weapon. I'll take it.
Yeah, it's one of those things in Hearthstone where you see it happen, you're just like, come, that's just not fair.
It's a
come
weapon.
On, please. Yeah,
it shouldn't
exactly.
be allowed.
Why did you just get 7/7 of stats out of your weapon? That's just criminally unfair.
And the weapon can attack too.
So Reno picked up now. He has hit the full power package of his deck, the Bran, the Kazakus, and the Reno Jackson. 3 of the highest impact cards in a deck that is sometimes filled with fairly low impact cards due to the nature of how you have to put the deck together. And it looks like Bran Kazakus is the line that Shtan has chosen here, just using the Abyssal Enforcer here for a less than perfect clear for sure. There's a very good chance that 4/1 just challenges your 6/6. It already does on the board with the weapon, but just Flame Tongue Totem, Lightning Storm, any small damage effect like that just helps it trade up even better.
Yeah, and with the way XHope's deck is built, you would imagine this turn looks like a Flame Tongue trade and then get the Totem Golem and like Hero Power, use the weapon for the 1/1.
Sure. And
just try and build up that board, because you kind of just want to play the game where you want your opponent to just think you've got Bloodlust in your hand at all times possible.
Correct,
because then
yes.
they just play filled with fear, basically.
Yep. And that's actually a trap that you do have to try and avoid as the player that's defending against Bloodlust. If you're scared of Bloodlust on any given turn and you're wondering, you know, how do I work out whether I'm supposed to play around Bloodlust right now? Think about the next turn, right? And decide, okay, if I play around Bloodlust this turn, can I still beat Bloodlust next turn? What about the turn after that? If the answer to those questions are no, then you kind of just have to shut your eyes and say, okay, I lose to Bloodlust at some point this game anyway.
Yeah, free Bloodlust tips from Subtle. There you go. Not even going to charge for that one. Ragnarok's coming in hand now for Shtan. Not going to be too great against this kind of board, as there's a lot of miss targets to a certain extent. Although they do help with the Bloodlust out, but I do feel like we're edging towards a Bran into Kazakus potion because the board isn't full of these giant Jades at the moment. They are clearable with a 5-mana Kazakus clear.
Yeah, Bloodlust would only be 18 damage in total right now, I believe. 7 in play, 9 in play with the weapon, plus 9 more from the Bloodlust. So yeah, 18 in total. So if he wants to take a free turn to just develop the big potions here, then Bran Kazakus is available, but he is going to have to machine gun some potion picks here, and he has half his rope remaining to pick 2 potions.
People think APM doesn't matter in Hearthstone. Shtan will prove
Wow.
otherwise.
All right, nailed it.
I don't even know what he picked, guys.
Don't
I
ask.
have no clue. That was just lightning fast. We will no doubt find out. The 5-mana one did look like armor. There we go. Deal 6,
Wow.
summon an 8/8. That is
Beautiful.
pretty good. I like it.
And summon 2, gain 7. 2 very, very solid potions.
Yeah, the 10-mana Kazakus potions are very much, a lot of the time, insurance policy potions. Right. If anything goes too crazy, I'll trade 1 turn to clear the board.
That 1 Storm, though, in hand for XHope. He will be thanking his hat right now that Storm has found his way into his hand, because it's looking like a very, very effective way to tidy up an otherwise fairly annoying board to deal with.
I'd love it if the turn was played now, when we can see XHope's hands, and we'll be like, the hat's playing the game. The hat's not on camera. He's there just moving the mouse. That'd be kind of crazy. I don't know how to respond to that, actually.
He is deep in thought here, but my stance on this turn is that Lightning Storm is not getting better. Lightning Storm is the bad card in your hand right now. The rest of your cards are fairly universally powerful, so yeah, it looks like XHope is just going to commit right now to as much damage as he can, load up the board with the Jade Golems, hold on to the weapon, threatening lethal now on the following turn. Shtan has to make something happen here, but he has the most happening of things, the Reno Jackson, massive effect, healing him back up to 4.
Absolutely huge for Shan, but this leaves the Flame Tongue, leaves us 2 minions on the board as well. There is a card I know I like, and I'm pretty sure you don't.
I loathe this
It's
card.
called Devolve. If you have not seen it get played, we'll probably find out in this game. It changes all your opponent's minions on their side of the board, of course, down by 1 mana, and truly ridiculous things can happen. I've seen a lot of the value comes against classes like Rogue.
Yep.
And even in Shaman Mirrors, you can actually get a lot of value on that. So so it's great to see what happens, as some weird cards can come into play. But getting back to my point, the Flame Tongue still being on the board is actually huge, just being allowing XHope to potentially get some really powerful trades off and continue the pressure after the Reno play.
Yeah, in defense of Devolve, which I don't really like to see as we see it being used now, it's got more forgivable as a deck inclusion since Finger has become such a powerful thing, because it's a great answer to a Finger preemptively or post-Finger to clear up the board. So I do see some worth in it in that, as well as the soon-to-be departed Conceal, being able to counter to that from Rogues. But in general, I just don't see it being too effective, and it's for exactly this reason. Devolved a board, trying to get a strong outcome. A 4-6 turned into a 4-6. Like,
Without taunt, though.
sure.
Value. I'll let XHope know later that you do forgive him for playing that card, just so he doesn't worry. But the
I'm
AoE
sure that would be a great relief to
I
him.
can imagine.
Yeah.
The AoE coming down there, as you said, you know, the board did still exist, and there wasn't a great way to clear it outside of the Kazakus potion. And simply generating an 8/8 is pretty good on an empty board. It's going to get answered by a frog.
Certainly is. Matt Hex taking care of the board swing from ShtanUdachi, but Shtan has almost successfully run XHope out of resources here. Just very low impact early game cards. Although the Jade Claws is a significant impact, because again, this just feels criminally unfair. Free 6/6 with your 2/2 weapon for 2. Paladins look at their Argent Lance and cry themselves to sleep.
Definitely, I think they just cry themselves to sleep anyway at this point. Yeah. But Shtan now seeing the Hex come out the previous turn on the Demon means that he can play Ragnaros with a bit of freedom here. And this Ragnaros, I need to check the text on this card. I feel like it deal 8 damage to your opponent's face every single time. Bloodlust coming into hand from XHope here means that he can start doing the old Bloodlust count. where you count the damage every single turn,
Yep.
whether you're close or not. You just make sure you're counting, because it is one of those things that's kind of awkward because the range is so far potentially of the damage you can do.
Yeah, 18 right now, plus
Yeah, there you go.
four from the Flame Tongue totem, so that's 22 already, just with only 2 minions on board. Bloodlust is just an absurd win condition if you do need to beat up on these heavy control decks. And XHope now is spreading his board very, very wide this turn, but how much respect is he going to give this Ragnaros?
And we're about to find out. I mean, it's a really tough call because XHope's probably thinking, yeah, Rag, you keep hitting face, and I just Bloodlust next turn and win.
Right.
But if he hits face and there's any form of additional damage from
goes
Shtan,
face.
that's going to be a
Jade
tough
Golem
one. There we
goes
go.
face.
XHope is just going for it. He has Bloodlust. He's seen the 10 mana Kazakus potion used for the AoE.
Shadow
it's
Flame
all
is lethal.
on Rag.
Shadow Flame is lethal here if he can pick it up. Power Overwhelming is one off just in terms of raw damage. But Leroy, hit face, Shadow Flame the Leroy, and then Soulfire the face, let Rag finish the job, would have been lethal in that spot.
Yeah, he can set up a 1 in 5 here, right? It's going to be the Power Overwhelming.
Oh, the Blood Mage! We forgot about the Blood Mage! The
Blood Mage is a
Soulfire.
card!
Yeah, I've very, very rarely, unless it's with Malagos, seen Soulfire being used with spell damage. And that recognition from ShtanUdachi, he didn't miss anything. I was too focused on the fancy lethal with Shadow Flame. Didn't even see the simple one. ShtanUdachi is on point, though, and the decision to disrespect the Ragnaros ended up having 0 impact. Would have been lethal either way.
Yeah, and a really close game, though, as we were saying. Both players just like the smallest amounts of damage and like, you know, 1 turn away from lethal on either end, with XHope threatening that Bloodlust for most of the back half of that game there.
Yep. Yeah, and again, it's the same thing I talked about. I talked about it in the Freeze Mage matchup, where you get to threaten lethal situations when it's not even in your hand. Make your opponent play inefficiently. Same thing when you're playing Bloodlust in your Shaman deck and you're in a revealed deck situation like this. You get to threaten Bloodlust even when that card is not in your hand, and the pressure is really on your opponent to make any reads they can possibly make in terms of ruling out individual cards that can't be Bloodlust, as well as just purely statistically evaluating the situation and saying, is my highest win rate play here to play around Bloodlust, or just to ignore Bloodlust and hope they don't have it?
Yeah, very difficult skill to actually, implement, because a lot of the time there are just pressures of, if I don't kill this minion, I just die a lot of the time. So very, very difficult. But Shtan is on match point potentially now. He has his rogue left. What does his rogue deck look like?
His rogue is a classic Miracle Rogue, not the modern aggro rogue or Finger Rogue that we've been seeing. And he has stuck with the Patches package after the Buccaneer nerf. His opponent, XHope, also has a rogue deck. Similar thing, but he's left Patches out of his deck, gone with Barnes, gone with more late game options. ShtanUdachi, the one big omission from his list is he's not playing Leroy. He's purely all in on board presence, getting the board early, finding a minion, Cold Blood, Conceal. That's kind of his lethal setup. He doesn't have that big burst damage from hand available to him.
Yeah, and then, just before we get into potentially the final game of this series, just got a bit of a teaser for you for what the next match coming up after this one is going to be.
Greetings, my friends, and welcome to the Bahamas as the Hearthstone Winter Championship continues. Dr. Jiki Ninki versus Nyria.
You can see Dr. J there just chilling, getting ready for his match that's going to be coming up next. He is a very, very fun guy. I've had the chance to hang out with him. I know we both have. And I kind of just love that guy, to be honest. He's got a lot of energy.
Yeah, and he's got a big chance to make a huge impact as well. He's up against Nyria. It's a real battle of the old guard versus the new in that terms. But he is a very, very impressive guy, as well as being a lot of fun to hang around with. When we sat down and talked to him, I really saw a lot of potential for him to have a big breakout year this year if he can get it off to a good start right now in this event. And I think TJ and Admirable will be on hand to talk you through that one. I'm sure they are over the moon to have Dr. J versus Nyria as the game that they get to cast.
Yeah, definitely. And just to let you know as well, XHope has just nipped to the bathroom before his next game. This is a best-of-7 series. It's a long way to go under a lot of pressure. So while we wait for him to get back, we're just going to check out what the casters thought were the best trailers for Hearthstone, the Caster Whip Around.
With the casters.
Ooh, my favorite Hearthstone cinematic.
Like the trailers, the opening trailers.
My favorite cinematic, I think, was the promo trailer that was run for Goblins vs. Gnomes.
Goblins and gnomes. Goblins and gnomes.
They're so charming and fun, and the music that they use are fantastic. But I think for me, Goblins vs. Gnomes was the standout.
They're all fantastic animations, but League of Explorers, that's my favorite.
We've climbed every cliff on Black Rock. Now the world cries out for heroes.
Obviously, you know, I'm a musical person. I enjoy the songs. I enjoy the clever lyrics, and that one is one of them that just like plays through your head over and over again.
Explorers lead, and we are in need of explorers.
I just remember at the very end, it's like, adventure we seek across land and sea, won't you come and join us? Then they're in the movie theater, he jumps up with his popcorn and goes, yes!
Yes!
My favorite Hearthstone cinematic trailer was the Grand Tournament, where I recall TJ and I were on a casting desk, and we had the idea of why don't we just go ahead and sing it? And so we sang the Grand Tournament trailer along with it as it played, and nobody noticed. So I'm taking that as a compliment.
From east to west, heroes are set, seeking glory in the greatest of events.
There are knights of noble steeds, those who bring them to the knees.
There are monsters to test their mettle at every turn.
It would have to be the one night in Karazhan. The whole aspect of just Medivh throwing a huge party for everyone is kind of great. It's my sort of guy.
Your host, the great Mage Medivh, invites you back to party down with me.
Frodan and I went to China for the release of Karazhan. We had a rehearsal about an hour before the reveal, and they showed us the trailer. And I remember the first thing that happened was Dan looked up and he's like, this expansion was made for me.
Come inside, meet your friends at the door. We've got a feast like you've never seen before.
That speaks volumes to me. You know me. I'm the guy that likes to dress up fancy. And if I went to the Karazhan party, I'd fit right in. Compared to some of these other casters from HCT, their style, they would definitely stick out like a sore thumb. Me, I fit right in.
This is a place of funky magical phenomena. Anything goes for one night in Karazhan.
Karazhan definitely the best trailer, but unlike some of the other casters, I will not be singing it for you, as I will sound terrible. Maybe I could dance, but not this time. We are ready to get into the next game, and potentially the final game of this series, though. ShtanUdachi versus XHope. Shtan on 3 wins, XHope on 1. He's going to have to win with the Shaman deck that I feel like is struggling in this series specifically.
Yeah, but pretty much any kind of Shaman these days has a pretty solid chance against Miracle Rogue. This particular deck, according to the VS data, again, 56% against Miracle. It's hard to evaluate the Lightning Storm cut and how that would affect the matchup. Lightning Storm, generally not a great card in the matchup, generally a card that you want to use against the aggro decks, Pirate Warrior, aggro Shaman, for example, but it can just come in clutch in a couple of games dealing with a stealth minion. The fact is, XHope does have that Devolve, which he's helpfully drawn, which can answer those stealth situations. So as long as he has that Devolve in hand, the loss of the Lightning Storm is probably not going to be a big miss. But do you know what can throw all that out the window? Drawing an opening hand like that when you're the rogue player.
Yeah, I would, you know, it does look pretty good, but Devolve still ruins the Van Cleef no matter how big it is.
Yep.
So this Devolve is kind of huge, and I feel like this is going to remove the sort of less good Devolve in the last game, which this puts me ahead in liking Devolve more than you. So, so I'm right.
That just does not work.
If you devolve a huge Van Cleef, that's huge, right?
It is massive, yeah, I agree. No dispute.
So I'm right. There we go. I'm not providing any more explanation. It just means I'm right.
Needed.
Yeah.
You have never been right about anything, Raven.
Wow.
Yeah.
I said you were a good caster once, so I mean, there you go. But
mind blow. Time paradox. I just don't know how to cope with this anymore.
Yeah, so we did see that there is no Van Cleef being made yet from Shtan. He's not going to rush into anything. Going to take his time, see what the next couple of draws are. As you know, a Hex is going to blow you out the water as well as the devolve. So there are multiple options there. And as we said, if that happens, Stan would probably be out of the game very, very early.
Right. And, you know, instead of wasting my time firing shots at you, if I was actually doing my job as an analyst, you know, it's not just the devolve that Shtan is worried about. It's the double copies of Hex as well. And the deck lists are revealed, so he knows all those answers are there. He's waiting until it's not a significant investment. This has still made a huge cleave, but all of the cards that he used got value. It wasn't just prep, sap a totem for no reason. So this is a Van Cleave with no downside. Devolve comes down, gives him a Flame Tongue totem, leaving that 3/3 on the board potentially. Obviously, Flame Tongue totem, great utility minion, got nothing on an 8/8.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a difference there, especially because XHope has a Flame Tongue of his own if he really wants to, you know, buff the Jade up, or he can actually just go for Jade Claws, make a you know, very similar trade, take a little bit of damage, or he could actually just leave up the Cleric, he probably doesn't care.
Yeah, I mean, Flame Tongue and trade into the Flame Tongue totem actually looks very high value here, but he can do the same thing with the Jade Claws as well while generating a 2/2. Either way, there is a target on the board if there was some absolute miracle situation where this Northshire Cleric could get some value by trading and healing, but I don't think there is any possibility of that one coming to fruition. But while it is on the board, there is an interaction potentially with Healing Stream Totem, which can make XHope's life just that little bit awkward potentially.
Yeah, and now the fact that it was left up means that a card like Cold Blood can get some value now. And there's no, there is a way to deal with the attack into the Maelstrom portal, but one that's just not super efficient in terms of what you want to do this turn. And also, you take 5 damage for a start, but ShtanUdachi is only on 2 cards. Not the position you want to be in this scenario.
No, I don't mind the way that he has played this out, though. Like I said, he's waited for the right time to get the Edwin value, even though it was kind of an all-in push. The cards that he used got value anyway. And then this aggressive push with Cold Blood. So first and foremost, his deck is built very, very aggressively. So he wants to use this. He does have the patches in his deck. He does have the South Sea deckhands in his deck alongside the Swashbucklers. So his deck is built to push damage like this, even with the omission of Leroy. Secondly, these games are just free rolls to an extent, so he can, you know, he's probably sitting back feeling comfortable, like I can afford to take the aggressive line here. If it backfires, sure, I can reset. Maybe next game I get a more stable mid-range hand and we can play the game out, you know, Pillager into Drake, the standard way that we want to see Miracle Road games going.
Yeah, and then we're going to see the old, or the potential of the old Flame Tongue onto Blood Imp to kill the questing adventurer. Oh, that one works, it's one off. I'll take it all back. I was distracted.
Well, a Flame Tongue on the Blood Imp and trade it in. Yeah, he actually just doesn't have a clean way of doing this without the Jade Lightning. So he's just going to develop a board here and say, hey,
think about this?
I mean, you've got 1 card in hand. If that, unless that card is Auctioneer and then you draw a backstab or prep or something like that off the top, then you are not getting the job done here. So I do not have to fear this whatsoever. My 5/5 thing from below is going to take care of your questing adventurer in almost every reasonable world. So I think that plays absolutely fine from XHope.
Yeah, and XHope now has the opportunity to just kind of ignore this Tomb Pillager because of exactly the same reason of just the 1 card in hand. Just drop Aya. Next turn, you can just drop the Chieftain, or just spam Jade Lightnings if he really needs to. So this opens up a lot of options here, but it looks like XHope's now going for the Jade Lightning play, which surprises me a little bit.
It might seem a little bit inconsistent, but the Jade Lightning just fit his curve much better that turn than it did on the previous turn. So I don't think, basically he didn't feel the need to be distracted by the Questing Adventurer, which is normally a massive board objective for the opponent, but he chose to ignore it. ShtanUdachi honestly just hit one of those rogue draws. The early Edwin would have had to carry him that game if he was going to get there. The Devolve that I was talking smack about in the previous game did its job, pretty much single-handedly locked that game down for XHope.
Yeah, and even with the Van Cleef as an 8/8, with the potential of a taunt delaying the game a little bit, a lot of the other draws just weren't that great for ShtanUdachi there. But XHope doing a great job of putting another point on the board there and getting a win with that Shaman deck. So looking good for him as he now has Warlock and his own Rogue left. So there's potential that we're going to see a Rogue mirror match, but with a few differences.
Yeah, a few key tweaks. As I mentioned, XHope has omitted the majority of the Pirate package. Still has the Swashbuckler Swashbucklers because they're just solid value cards for what Miracle Rogue wants to do. Doesn't have the deck hands, doesn't have patches, and is replacing that kind of stuff with Barnes and Leroy, which is not in ShtanUdachi's deck. So more power in the late game, more mid-game utility options with Barnes. So the way that matchup will play out is that Shtan will probably try to get off to the fastest start, try and consolidate an early Pirate, push damage, and then try and set up a Cold Blood Conceal 2-turn lethal setup. Whereas XHope will be playing more of the control game, trying to push towards those big miracle turns that he can put together. But there is the other matchup available as well, which is the Reno lock matchup, which is a heavy advantage, I'd have to say, to ShtanUdachi overall.
Yeah, I mean, XHope isn't particularly running anything crazy in his Reno lock. It's a fairly standard list. There's a Blast Crystal Potion in there that isn't in everyone's list,
sure,
but isn't uncommon either. So nothing really stands out there, and that is the one we are going to see right now as we move on to the next game. ShtanUdachi on his Rogue, of course. His only deck he has left to win with. XHope going for the Reno lock.
Yeah, ShtanUdachi going first, so chooses to throw away full mulligan, including the Edwin Van Cleef. There are just too many high-value cards that you want in this matchup. You want the early Pirates. You want Tomb Pillagers and Azure Drakes. Was about to be the end of my sentence. ShtanUdachi hitting that perfectly. 2 win conditions in this match. One is just early Pirate into Cold Blood into get
Kill
you.
him. Yep.
The other one is just curving out Pillager into Drake, hitting a big late game Auctioneer turn, and then just having too many resources as the game goes on for the Reno lock to be able to efficiently answer.
Yeah, and looking the way XHope's hand is panning out, the Dirty Rat is a very risky card to play in this in this matchup. There's potential of just, you know, if a Gadget Zang comes out, if a Tomb Pillager comes out as well early on, it can be a huge problem. And there isn't too many minions that wouldn't have been played in the early turns anyway to, you know, that are enough of a benefit to draw out.
Yeah, it's generally awkward as an early game play in this matchup because, as you said, if a small minion is in hand, the only small minions that exist are 1-mana Pirates, essentially. So they get played on turn 1, meaning by the time you're able to play your Dirty Rat, it's only huge punishing minions or minions with special effects that can come out. The one exception to that is Questing Adventurer. And if you somehow just have the God Read and you nail the Questing Adventurer, then good for you. But most of the time, Dirty Rat on turn 2, not a viable play in this matchup.
Yeah, Shadow Ball does line up pretty well against the Tomb Pillager. Slightly off curve, though, being on turn 4 here for XHope, but you would deal with the Tomb Pillager very nicely. And I wonder if we're going to see almost like a mirror play a little bit later on, with the potential like just Coin Emperor regardless of what gets played next turn, to just get this kind of value, because Twisted Nether being a turn earlier could actually be a big deal here.
So the Pillager into Drake curve has played out, and now questing Drake's second Pillager in hand. Shtan is hitting all of those mid-game resources, but the decision here to play Drake instead of the Tomb Pillager could make a difference. Is Coin Emperor something that you can think about? It is only the difference of a dagger charge, but potentially with the Emperor coming down now, XHope can set up his own potential lethal situations. But ShtanUdachi is going to develop his first big push of the game now. Questing Adventurer number 1 is hitting play. But what's his follow-up here? Is he going Swashbuckler, potentially double coining the Tomb Pillager and then trading, or are we going to see the sap being used here?
Very interesting. He's going to go for the sap. So he just wants to go, basically. He doesn't want to try and trade and play a bit of a longer game. For me, ShtanUdachi now just goes, okay, this is the turn. I got the Pirate value. The Demon Wrath, not what Shtan wanted to see at all from the Swashbuckler. It's just not going to help him. Now here comes potential possibility of Dirty Rat into a Shadow.
Absolutely
lame.
Second best outcome, I'd say, there for XHope from his perspective. He would have been praying for Auctioneer, but after that, outside of Edwin Van Cleef, having already seen one Questing Adventurer, Drake was probably about the most realistic expectation he could go for if he wasn't going to hit that Auctioneer, which would have been the massive card that he was going for.
Yeah, and now ShtanUdachi's got it all on him to try and pull himself out of this situation. And speaking of Auctioneer, I think that's what he has to draw with this hand. 2 coins, 2 preps, and I guess the Demon Wrath can do something.
And a partridge in a pear tree. Yep. Dirty Rat gets to stick around on the board long term. XHope is now just going for maximum board presence, breaking up his combo pieces, recognizing potentially when matchups don't play out in the standard format. Standard format? That's a completely different thing. In the regular fashion, I should say. So Normally, you're looking to hold Leroy Faceless Power Overwhelming, big 20 damage burst combo. Sometimes breaking that up and just making a big push for the board is much, much more effective.
After seeing a sap as well, you
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
there is very small outs that get punished, but what was I saying? There is a Gadget Zan, and that means that Shtan can start cooking with gas now with these card draws. There's the 1 coin, there's the 2 coin, and a million preps to follow.
Yeah, prepping now doesn't feel like he's guaranteed to play Cold Blood this turn. Normally, a better situation there would be playing Cold Blood since he still has mana available, and then trying to hit more spells that he can use with his natural mana, using the preps as late as possible. But since he doesn't want to commit fully to using the Cold Blood this turn, he's holding back using the prep early. Does get the Fan of Knives, which is the single best spell to prep in your deck as the Miracle Rogue. Sap picked up now as well to allow him to keep cycling, and look at how well he's allocated his mana this turn. This is something that is often overlooked from people who watch Miracle Rogue play. The very, very best players always, somehow, seemingly by accident, seem to end up in this situation where the perfect cards come off the top and they have exactly the right amount of resources to play them. I'm telling you now, that's not by accident. That is meticulous planning in terms of which cards are available and maximizing your mana utilization on each turn.
Yeah, I was going to say constant adjustment as well to that plan. Every single card you draw changes what you're going to do next, potentially. So that was a really nice turn there for Shtan. Was it enough, though? Because there is a Twisting Nether in hand. There is a Reno Jackson in hand. So 2 very, very defensive cards here. And I think at this point, you're probably feeling confident on 15. So I wouldn't mind just attack, twisting, because if you just Reno, you're taking so much additional extra damage because of that conceal. Then it's kind of negates itself to a certain extent. Yeah, you get the minion on the board, but you could just Twisting, call it a day, let him play something next turn and go from there.
I would expect to see a Twisting Nether. It doesn't feel good from XHope's position because he does have a decent board state of his own consolidated, and he's very, very close to threatening lethal himself. But yeah, like you said, the Reno push is potentially a bit ambitious. But while we're on the subject, yeah, this is a brutal board clear for Shtan to come up against. But look at Shtan's hand. He is not done yet either. He has Questing Adventurer, Auctioneer, 2 coins, and there's the second conceal.
He's just going to play the same turn again.
Edwin as well.
Oh my god. Okay, well, we just saw the Twisting. We've seen the Shadow Flame. There's not a lot left for XHope to clear a board now.
This is interesting to me. He's seen the big Shadow Flame being used. He's seen Twisting Nether being used, but he's still choosing to hold back that Edwin Van Cleef, feeling like he has enough turns to go for 2 big board pushes here, potentially. Could have had a huge Edwin Van Cleef instead of that Auctioneer on that turn.
Yeah, but look what he's got left and what he's drawn into as well. Double of this. He's potentially just setting up for a huge lethal regardless. There's not a lot that directly answers this board. There is obviously Reno that can put you back up to 30, but there's just so much damage available. It's absolutely crazy. And if Swashbuckler gives him something better than the Demon Wrath as well, you got to be feeling good about this.
There are outs here for ShtanUdachi for a straight-up OTK after the Reno. Going to 30 life, the double of this in hand, plus the ever-growing Questing Adventurer means that there are outcomes in terms of the draws from his Auctioneer with only 4 cards left, and from the Swashbuckler giving him more damage that can end the game even through the maximum heal here.
One of the draws is a second Cold Blood, right? He's only played the one, does he?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Well, Powerful Army not really going to help, but the additional tap before Reno, of course, the way to play that turn. Get an extra.
There's the Cold Blood. I believe this is
draw.
100% guaranteed lethal from this position, as long as ShtanUdachi does not fatigue himself in the process due to drawing so many cards. I think Shtan has the 30-0 1-turn kill from this spot, and he is going to be going through in the winner's bracket.
I'm just going to sit back and watch this happen. Just a pause from Shtan there. He's like, let me just add this up properly, continue to make sure I'm on the right track. Completely understandable, because this is an explosive way to end this series. As you said, as long as Shtan doesn't find a way to kill himself before he kills his opponent, this is looking pretty good.
Yep, attacks with the minions first. That's 18 plus the Hellfire. The questing adventurer will push through for lethal, taking 3 damage to himself, drawing the fatigue. That's not going to be enough damage to kill himself. But XHope is well and truly dead. And look at that look.
Yeah.
He was hoping against Hope, was XHope the entire time, that the lethal was not going to be there. Shtan had it guaranteed the whole way along. What a fantastic performance for one of the big standout players from Europe, ShtanUdachi.
Yeah, an absolutely explosive ending to that series, and you saw throughout the whole game with the Rogue is that he knew exactly what he was doing. He'd played that game a million times, knew all the outcomes for all of the draws as well, and it showed it as he went pretty much straight away in for that lethal to end. We can check out what the bracket looks like after 2 series today. The winner's match is going to be Frozen versus ShtanUdachi, which is going to be absolutely...
try that one again.
No. Which is going to be absolutely fantastic. And then we see in the lower bracket of Group A, it's going to be B787 versus XHope later on. So this is looking absolutely fantastic. And Rachel is with ShtanUdachi now for some questions about that victory.
Thanks so much, guys. Stan, what an incredible match to go out on. What a way to win there. But I do want to ask you, as someone who plays decks of your own creation more often, who loves the creative part of Hearthstone, is it tough for you to come here and play with these standard meta decks?
Yes, it's not cool. Лучше так скажу. Конечно, всегда приятно, что многие люди играют моими созданными колодами, но сейчас я привез сюда достаточно стандартные колоды, которыми тоже здесь нужно было победить, и потому что сейчас на данный момент сложно было сделать какие-то контрколоды нынешнему метагейму, так как сейчас все достаточно в застое, и формат турнира достаточно большой было всем, слишком много колод нужно было сделать.
I like being creative with my decks, but this was an important tournament, and it was hard to come up with something creative that would beat the current meta, so I had to play with the standard decks.
Sacrifices were made, but they paid off.